I'm Samantha Bosshart, the Executive Director of the Saratoga Springs Preservation Foundation, and I'm really quite thrilled to host this program because I have a connection to Galveston myself. But before I get started, I want to just share about the mission of the Saratoga Springs Preservation Foundation. And that was our organization was founded in 1977 when Saratoga Springs didn't look like it did today. And in fact, in many ways, it reminds me of the Strand in Galveston in the 1970s, where there were vacant storefronts and there weren't many restaurants, and it wasn't a popular downtown destination that it is today. The Broadway was very similar here. But they were both wealthy resort destinations as historically. So to me, I see a lot of similarities between Saratoga and Galveston, including its rich architecture, unique history, and as I said, resort destinations that were for the wealthy, and also had a gambling history, as well as had an economic decline and saw a revitalization in part because of preservation. So our organization mission is to promote the preservation and enhancement of the architectural and cultural landscape heritage of Saratoga Springs, and it carries out its mission through advocacy, technical assistance, and education and restoration. I will share that I have ties to Galveston. My parents lived in Galveston from until I was 5. And I'd love to hear where everybody is tuning in from, but I lived there until I was 5. And then when my parents moved to Ohio, I returned in 1995, and that's where I rehabbed several buildings in the East End Historic District, which is a National Historic Landmark District. And eventually, I started my nonprofit preservation career with the Galveston Historical Foundation. And Tommie does not remember me, which I wouldn't expect her to, because I was just a wee young one starting out my little preservation career. But I worked with the African American Heritage Committee at the Galveston Historical Foundation. I worked there for 5 years, and it really inspired me to continue on and has led me to my career here. I learned about Juneteenth upon moving back to Galveston in the 1990s because of its rich history. So when it became a federal holiday, it was not I knew about it, but those around me up here were not familiar with it. So that's why I think it's really special that we get to have partner with Will Wright, who's helped us, he's organized this through the Galveston Historical Foundation. He's the Chief Creative Officer. But I'm not more pleased. Sorry, Will. I am pleased to introduce Tommie Boudreaux, who was born in Galveston Island and is the retired Galveston Independent School District administrator who graduated from historic Central High School. She served on the Galveston Historical Foundation's board of directors and is the past chair of the foundation's African American Heritage Committee. She's a member of the Old Central Cultural Center board of directors and Golden Life member of the Delta Sigma Theta sorority, incorporated, where she is the Galveston's chapter historian and chairperson for their Heritage and Archives Committee. She's a member of the Coastal Community Federal Credit Union Board of Directors. She has published works that include co-authoring books African Americans of Galveston, Lost Restaurants of Galveston's African American Community, and Galveston's Juneteenth Story, and Still We Rise, as well as multiple newspaper articles. So we are really thrilled to turn it over to Tommie and have her share about Juneteenth and its rich history. Thank you so much, Tommie, for joining us.
Good evening. All I'm seeing is submissions. Oh, there you are. Hi, welcome to Galveston. I am Tommie Boudreaux, and I think it's Samantha. I don't remember you. I need to see your face, so I probably will. And thank you so much for working with us, because you informed me that you actually helped us at Rosewood Cemetery when it was in its, I guess you would say, its baby stages. So thank you so much for that. I generally start this. I'm starting with a little history of Galveston Historical Foundation. So, Will, if you go to the next slide, okay. Galveston Historical Foundation, better known as just GHF. GHF was formed as the Galveston Historical Society in 1871. They were more of a literary society, and it incorporated in 1954 as Galveston Historical Foundation, a nonprofit entity devoted to historic preservation and history of Galveston County. The first property saved by the foundation was the Sammy May Williams House. Sammy May Williams was one of the three founders of Galveston, Texas. This is the house on the left. I'm assuming it's around the time that they were ready to demolish it. It's still a house there. To the right, it's the way it looks today. It once was owned by Galveston Historical Foundation, but now a family owns it. It is the second oldest frame house in Galveston. Both were built in the 1830s. So that was the first one. And they continue. Galveston Historical Foundation is not just homes and buildings. They're into maritime. They own the tall ships of Texas. They own a lot of unusual things for a historic society. Dr. Jones, the director, said that they own a smokestack. The building is that, but they own the smokestack. They own a vault in a cemetery. They own a big clock that's on the Strand, and you can name so many other things that they own. Many people come to Galveston, or their family lived here, and when they're going through their family's estate or going through the homes, they find things that they share with GHF. So we have a lot of things for Galveston that most historic societies don't have. And we do own these beautiful homes. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is our African American Heritage Committee now. It was formed in 2002 at Ashton Villa. At the time, the director, Marsh Davis, was from Indiana, and he didn't understand why we didn't have a African American society or some type of organization, because there was so much history here. So Maggie Williams was with the Education Committee. I joined her, and he suggested we just get a feel for the community, how many were interested. But on that first meeting, we had 40 people there. Now, over the years, many have left or they've gotten interested in other things, but I'm there on the, I guess on my left. Well, I have red on, so you know who I am. I am the last founder of the organization. Our first project was Rosewood Cemetery. It was a cemetery that was founded by a group of African Americans in 1911. They just didn't have the proper burial sites for African Americans. So they purchased land in the west end of Galveston before the seawall had been completed in 1911. The first burial was 1912. The last one was 1944. By then, the cemetery was receiving a lot of water because they were moving that seawall past that area. So it was neglected for a long time. Many of the shareholders had passed their shares to other people, but the last person who owned the share, was Mr. Thomas D. Armstrong, better known as T.D. Armstrong. When he passed on, the family decided to sell the land, and they had more land than just the cemetery. I mean, it was a large property. We never knew what they were going to do with the rest of it. But the developer who purchased the property donated the cemetery to Galveston Historical Foundation. So there you see that we have, and that was in 2006. 2011, we actually received this Texas Historical Commission marker. And also in 2014, This cemetery is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. And we're certainly proud of that because that's not something that's just given lightly. So let's get to the next one. Okay, let's get to Texas. Okay, this is a map of Texas. I think this is probably about 1850 or so on. You probably can see the little areas that look there, little blocks or rectangular places. Those are where most of the plantations were and the owners of home. Galveston is so small, there's a little star that shows it, because Galveston is an island. So, and I'm going to show you a larger picture of Galveston. Next one. Okay, so that little strip of land, and you can see the water around it. It is an island. It's only about 32 miles long and only about 3.5 miles in its deepest point. It's located between Louisiana and Mexico on the Gulf Coast. It's about 55 miles from Houston, southeast of Houston. Galveston didn't have plantations because of the soil, but there were plantations surrounding Galveston. Galveston was designated as the major port, and I think about 1925, 1928. So all cotton, anything that the Texas produced had to come through Galveston, which means became a very wealthy city. Many of the enslavers actually had homes on Galveston Island, but their plantations were elsewhere outside of Galveston. Next slide. The first known person of African heritage was Estevanico, and he arrived on the island. It wasn't Galveston then. He was an explorer, so he kept notes of his travel, and he was involved in a shipwreck, and he found himself on the island. So he lived here a while, but the last time we heard of him is that he was, I think, in Austin. So no one knows what happened to him after that. But we know that it was at least in 1550. Okay, if we go to the next one. Now, Galveston, we had slaves, and we had those people who were not obeying the law. And you see two names there. One is Jean Lafitte. He was a pirate. Yes, we had a pirate. He brought his men and followers from Louisiana. In fact, Louisiana kind of, they say that they strongly encouraged him to leave and settled in Galveston in 1817. For a few years, the island and the bay were the base for smuggling slaves after the United States entered into the importation of human cargo in 1808. So there were a law that prohibited them importing slaves from other places. It did not prohibit them slave selling or buying slaves within the states. So that still occurred. Actually, Galveston, let's say this, Jane Bowie was one of his best clients. In fact, he purchased slaves from Lafitte for $1 a pound and then would sell them and made, substantial profit. By 1821, I think the few citizens that were here in Galveston just felt they just didn't like the way Mr. Lafitte was behaving. So in 1821, he was forced to leave by the United States Navy. So that's the story of two of the people who were instrumental in bringing many of the enslaved people to Galveston. Okay, next slide. Next, we have Stephen F. Austin. Okay, I know he's our capital is named after Stephen F. Austin. He did a lot of things in Texas. His father came to Texas, I guess, around early 1820s, and he realized that Texas had a lot of soil. I mean, great soil, and was not. It hadn't been, they hadn't grown anything on it, so it was rich. And we were under Mexican rule, so they didn't support slavery, but he was allowed to purchase the land and sell it to. We used the word planters, but they were enslavers from the other southern states. And the way he sold the land is that it was based on the number of acres they could receive was based on the number of people he could bring, his wife, the children, and quote unquote workers. And now we know who the workers were. And so his idea was to have, I think he titled it Old 300. He wanted to have 300 families to come to Texas. And they did. And Stephen F. Austin really actually ended up having 5 colonies altogether. So if you just do the math, if you had the mother, father, 2 children, and maybe 3 or 4 workers, you multiply that by 300, and then you multiply it by 5. There were a number of people came to Texas via Stephen F. Austin invitation. Okay, let's go to the next one. This is just a typical sign, a meeting. This one happened to be in Galveston in 1856. I think the discussion was about coming up with some more rules and laws for the free men, free slaves, or free Black people, and those who were slaves. They were mixing and mingling too much and having too much fun. I think that's the basic of the story. But this is one of the flyers. Anytime they had a meeting, you would see this type of flyer. This is one of the first things that I found online. Okay, we go to the next one. Now, this is the one that really the whole story is about. June 19, 1865, when Major General Gordon Granger came to Galveston with 2,000 men. Many of them were African-American soldiers. And the order was, and it's actually, there's an S on order. So if you see the original document, it says General Orders number 3. And I don't know if you can read that, but maybe you find it somewhere. But basically, there are 2 words in that order that are very important. And they were written by, in fact, the order was actually written by Major Emory. This is the man on the side, one with the shorter hair, no beard. He was an abolitionist and he didn't support slavery. So he actually was the one who penned the orders. And General Granger was just the one who delivered it. So he had those 2 words in there. If you read it, the first section of it gives all the things that you think you want to hear, you know, absolute equality, you will work for wages and so on. But when you read the latter part of it, it kind of contradicts the first because it gives them rules of what they can or cannot do. So, but this still is an important one. And that did happen here on June 19, 1865. Now, it wasn't a surprise because through, I guess, Telegraph and some of the old newspapers we had, they knew that Granger was coming because I know he was in Alabama. He was near Alabama on June 13th. He was near Louisiana on June 17th. He actually, Galveston prepared a place for him, so he actually had a headquarters here. Next slide. Okay. So this is where his headquarters was. The building is no longer there. It's the Osterman building. It's now a parking lot. So this is the street that was known as the Wall Street of the Southwest, because many of the enslavers had their businesses located on this street. They transacted their business here through the companies that were shipping and importing and exporting products. So this is the famous Strand. And on that same street, you will find our Juneteenth marker, and I'll show that in a little bit. But Galveston had a lot of names over the years because in the 30s and 40s, they were Little Las Vegas, Sin City, they were the Queen City, the place something of the Southwest. Yeah. What is it? Playground of the Southwest, because everybody would come to Galveston and have fun just like they do now. Okay, let's move to the next one. Okay, some people said, was there a celebration? Yeah, there were a lot of celebrations. Some of them were small and some were big, but on July 1865, there was a General Moore who was stationed in Galveston, and somebody unorganized, they just used the word organized, we never got the name, wanted to have a ball. So they called it the Fancy Ball. Moore had given the organizer permission to have the ball. It actually was held in the building. This is the Berlocker building. It's on Mechanic Street, about a block from Strand. The building looks basically the same today. It's still standing. I don't know exactly. I don't know, they have different shops, I know, downstairs. I don't know if the upper part is rented out, but I know the building is still there. He gave the organizer permission to have the ball. The next day, the mayor heard about the ball and he arrested the organizer. Moore, really upset about it, he released the organizer and he arrested the mayor. So, of course, the newspapers were people reading, they didn't like what he did, but I guess they really didn't realize, I guess so many of the southern states didn't realize that once the Union took over, you really had no voice. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is something that I guess I was looking for some information that I'd been told for years, that there was an older gentleman, I know he was much older than my father, was the first policeman in Galveston. And working with GHF, you know, you don't use rumors, you try to find the facts. So I just opened my search up and I found out that the first Black policemen were actually assigned in 1867, shortly after, 2 years after order was issued. And happened there, this similar to the Fancy Ball, when General Charles Griffin presented the list to, first of all, he told the mayor to dismiss the department, the police department, because he wasn't pleased with their service. He asked the mayor to just dismiss all the police officers and he would come up with his own list. Well, when he presented the list to the general, to the mayor, there were 5 colored men names on the list. And with a few days of heated discussion, Mr. Griffin fired the mayor and replaced him. So the 5 names, you see there are 5 names on there. I think they're at the bottom. They were the 5 men who actually became the first policemen in Galveston. We don't really know how long they served, because about 1875, the Union had returned the cities to the cities, turned the cities back to the community. So they may not have been there after that time, but that was some interesting to know. Okay, next slide. Okay. Even though the order indicated that, you know, the ex-enslavers were free to do some things, Texas and so many other states came up with other ways to, I guess you would say, to keep them in bondage. So they came up with the Black Codes. And you may want to jot that down and read it for yourself. It basically had very strict rules, very strict consequences, and it was just, well, I just said it was a horrible document. Finally, it was banned, but many pieces of that they used in the Jim Crow era. So, I mean, I'm old enough to remember the black and white, so places. Okay, next slide. Our first school was Barnes Institute. It opened by the Freedom Bureau. That was in 1866. That school, I think kids could go up to at least 6th or 7th, maybe 8th grade. So that was the first school that we had. Okay, next slide. Okay, so after that, I mean, it stayed that way for some years, but in 1885, Galveston, city of Galveston, built the first high school for African Americans. In fact, it was the first high school for African Americans in the state of Texas. And for years, if families could afford it, they would actually send them to Galveston. They would rent a room or find some place for them to stay, maybe through the churches or friends they may know, in order to earn a diploma. There's a lady she's 99 years old now, and she lived in Hitchcock, Texas, which is about 20 miles from here. She recalls having to come to Central in order to earn her high school diploma. Now, the little shack on the left side, the one that looks like it's maybe standing on one brick, that was the first school. Down below it, it's the second school. The one in the middle is the most important one. It was like the third school. And you can see it's a beautiful building. It was actually designed by Nicholas Clayton, who designed many of the buildings, beautiful buildings we have in Galveston. The one on the right top, that is the fourth building. Now, we don't have the fifth building on here. The fifth building is the building in which I graduated from Central High School. We also had our own public library, not just a room with books, but actual functioning library. Had the Dewey Decimal System, you had library cards, and it was for the citizens of Galveston, not just for the school. It was actually housed in the building you see above. And you can see on it the colored branch of Rosenberg Library. So all the African-American citizens of Galveston could come there and read books, check books out. And one of the beauty things about, you say Rosenberg Library, there was the white Rosenberg Library. They had a sort of a semi-contract with Central, where if there were books or materials they needed, our library clerk could actually borrow them from them. So we were able to actually get advanced information from there. I didn't attend any of those schools, so I don't have the picture of the one that I have. But it was the very first, and actually it continued to about the mid-40s, because as I mentioned, Hitchcock, all the little smaller cities, Texas City, Lamar, Hitchcock, all of those cities still hadn't provided a high school for African Americans. So they were still getting to Galveston any way they could in order to earn their high school diploma. Some, if people worked in Galveston, they rode with them to Galveston. And finally, I think I spoke with Miss and Mrs. Bell. She was one of those in Hitchcock. By the time she was ready for high school, the state was giving the families a little stipend to help with transportation. She actually rode a commercial bus that stopped them on Broadway about 3 or 4 blocks from the high school, and that's how she earned her high school diploma. So there was forward-thinking people in Galveston, and many of the other cities, you know, even larger than Galveston, were kind of slow to move. So I'm a graduate of the school, and I love to share that information. I didn't graduate in 1885, but I did graduate from Central High School. Okay, next slide. Okay, we're also have 4 of the, I guess, the oldest churches of 4 denominations. First, I'll start with Avenue L. Avenue L was founded in 1840. The one in the middle is Reedy Chapel. Now, the thing about Reedy Chapel was one of the places in which the announcements were made. In fact, in Galveston, for our research, there were only 4 places in which the order was either posted or read. And that was the Custom Building, the courthouse, on the Strand, and as the newspaper said, the little colored church on Broadway. All of these churches are still functioning churches. They still have service. Now, Avenue L, if you look to the top, I think it's to my left when we say Avenue L, you'll see a little small building in the back. That little small building is part of the original building. Okay, we have the first Episcopal Church that was founded in 1884. We have the first Catholic Church founded in 1889. So we have a lot of firsts. We have a lot of things to be proud of. So, and Reedy Chapel recently, for their Juneteenth program, they actually had President Biden came down to visit us, and I got a chance to take a picture with him. So I was pretty proud of that. Okay, next slide. Okay, Al Edwards. Al Edwards is the reason Texas has a state holiday. He was a state representative from Houston, but his family spent a lot of time in Galveston. He knew Galveston history, so he was one of the ones who presented the bill. But you know, he had people like Douglas Matthews had grown in Galveston. Mr. Thomas, a well-known citizen in Galveston. They helped him get this materials together. So the bill was actually signed in 1979. That's his statue you see on the side there. It's actually on the grounds of Ashton Villa. And we had a citywide, well, we always did have nice celebrations, but this was truly a citywide. Anybody who wanted to do anything, we had from vendors, you name it, but everybody could have fun. Now, everybody didn't get the day off, but if they wanted to use another holiday to take that day off or another vacation day, they could. But we also found out after Texas, many other states began to recognize it. Some of them didn't have a holiday, but they recognized it. And if they didn't do anything but maybe have a luncheon or a dinner or something, so it actually grew. That was recognized that Galveston, Juneteenth, June 19th, was an important date to celebrate. So if you come to Galveston, as I mentioned, we're actually in the exhibit right now. I'm in one section of it. So, you know, our exhibit is in Still Your Eyes. So if you ever come to Galveston, you'll see his statue on the front lawn, and then you can certainly come in and find what we've done in terms of our exhibit. Okay, next slide. Okay, celebration. So this is just a few places, so shots of things we've done. Actually, the one in the middle is on the grounds of Ashton Villa. Next slide. Okay, so I'm in the 1859 carriage house of Ashton Villa. This is where our exhibit is located, and Still We Rise. The picture on the left, I think this may be about, I don't know. I know it's 1800s. If you notice something, I know if you look at the two screens, if you look at the fence, to the left, the older looking building, you see the fence, it looks like it may be 6 feet high, something like that. And you see on the right, the fence is short. Well, they didn't cut the fence is actually buried. The first section of the building, which was some would say below ground attic or basement, after the 1900 storm, many of the homes that were left, if they could raise them, they're on stilts. Galveston is a city of stilts. But those that they couldn't, if there was a way that they could close in the bottom section. So you can see the difference in the height. And when you come, you'll see how high the fence actually was, because the gate, they still use the same gate. They attached it to it. So, and at one time there was a section you could actually look through a little window and you could see where they actually filled in. Right now, because of that, the building has received a lot of moisture, and eventually they're going to have to do something to save it. So, but this is where we are. You don't see the carriage house now, but it's to the, if you're looking at it like I'm looking at it, the new one is to the right of the building. Okay, next page, next one. Okay, about Ashton Villa. My really strong interest in Ashton Villa is, of course, I'm so glad that we have celebrations here. I'm glad we have the exhibit here. I am so glad we have Mr. Edwards' statue here. But my interest in the building is Alex. He was purchased by Mr. Brown, who's the owner of the building. In building his house, he wanted something different than any other home in Galveston. And this is the bill of sale for Alex. He purchased him. He was a master mason. In fact, one of our members who've done a lot of study on the African Americans who did come, African Americans, but the enslaved who were in Galveston, in Texas, or in the United States, they actually had skills. So many of them had skills. So he was a master mason, and Mr. Brown, his name was James Brown, he, growing up as a young man, he did the same type of work. So in purchasing him, he really knew he had somebody to get the job done. So we really feel that Alex actually oversaw the building of this particular structure. So next slide. Alex left in 1865 as a free man, but he came back in 1870 and worked for Mr. Brown for wages. And he built this fireplace. for the Brown family. It was actually in the family room. It's the original fireplace. It's still there. If you look to the right, that section, it looks like a ballroom. I think that was once the family room and the kitchen. But over the years, different people owned the building. And finally, I think it was the Shriners that made it a ballroom. But that's his fireplace in that room. There are a lot of original things in this building. Next slide. We have the Middle Passage marker. And I don't know when the group was organized, but there is a group. There's actually the, I guess, Middle Passage organization. I don't know the complete name, but what they have done is they've identified all the ports in which people were enslaved and came in on those ports. Galveston was one of them. So the marker actually gives the, it's located at 22 Harborside Drive. That's on the north side of Galveston. The marker commemorates the slaves who entered at Galveston's port and those who perished during the transatlantic slave trade. So that marker is one of the places that you might want to see if you come to visit Galveston. Next slide. Okay, and here's the Strand again. The Osterman building is on the left, and here's our marker, our Juneteenth marker. From what I understand, the Osterman building is now a parking lot. I did mention that, but actually the marker, from what I understand what other historians said, he thinks that marker is placed right in where the front door would have been to that building. And we dedicated that one in 2014, and it's located on 22nd and Strand. Okay, next slide. Okay, then we get to really celebrate in June 2021 with the signing of the national holiday, Juneteenth holiday. Now, Juneteenth, it was, we really don't know how they came up with Juneteenth. However, and they had several names before that was coined or adopted in some way. It was once Emancipation Day, Freedom Day, Jubilee Day, Black Independence Day, and Juneteenth Independence Day. I'm assuming somebody, maybe they were running out of space to write it all out for a flower or something, and they shortened it. But we're happy about that day. Next slide. And here, little information about And Still We Rise. Our exhibit covers prior to June 1865. It shares what happened on that day. It shares the thoughts of the ex-slaves, how they felt. We have narratives from Library of Congress with the Writers Project, where they actually interviewed ex-slaves and they told about that day, how they felt when they knew they were free and what happened later on. Our exhibit goes through the Jim Crow era and tells a number of success stories too. We have many people who've come from Galveston and been successful. I don't know how many people online who listen to R&B music. There's a song, if you listen to R&B, at Christmas you hear it all the time, is Merry Christmas Baby. Well, this young man, his name is Charles Brown. He actually lived in Texas City, but his grandmother actually rented a room across from Central so that he can earn his high school diploma. And he became, his grandmother taught him classical music, but he got involved with the band and went on. We know he did well. Jack Johnson was born here. Barry White was born in Galveston. And Barry wasn't here that long, but he's still the BOI because it's on his birth certificate. So we have a number of people that we really are very proud to share the information. So if you come to the exhibit, you'll see interactive screens. We don't have artifacts. It's just a lot of information that we packed into a small place. Okay, next slide. And of course, our committee to support Rosewood Cemetery, we've published 3 books. The first one was African Americans of Galveston, and much of the information we have in here came from that book and other things we researched. We also, because our director, Dr. Jones, really enjoys good food, he suggested first that we write a cookbook because the first one went so well. Well, in trying to find some of those old restaurants, they weren't around anymore. Most of the people had passed on, but we were able to find family and friends of some of them. So there aren't a lot of recipes in the book, but their stories are just, I mean, just to hear about their lives. Many of them came from Louisiana, Brazoria, came here with little or nothing, but built up a business because they knew how to cook. Were able to buy homes, were able to send their children to college. So their background stories are wonderful. And our last book that we actually, I think it was released in 2024. It is actually the companion book to the exhibit because we can only get so much in this small space. Next slide. And that's my story of Juneteenth. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Tommie. So much for sharing the history of Juneteenth and the story about Galveston. Sydney, can we go to get rid of the uh, does anybody have any questions? And if so, you can put them in the chat. I will just say that brought back a lot of really good memories.
So, okay, am I speaking to the young lady who said?
Yep, yep.
Okay.
You probably wouldn't. I didn't wear my glasses back then. But yes, I was there when 2002 with the Rosewood Cemetery. I worked with Marsh, and anyway,
Marsh
so
Davis, yes.
yes, and I'm still friends with him.
Okay.
But he just retired this year.
I know, yeah.
But I guess I was just curious where um that beautiful Nicholas Clayton Central School was originally located.
Okay, I don't know if we can go back to that slide, but I think I think the fourth building.
Yeah,
It
the
is
big
actually,
grand one.
yeah, it's in the back. You can actually see it because as the school grew, they had to expand. So the last building that we now is Old Central Culture Center. It's the one that was just above the library. You can see the building in the back. Now, I don't know why they demolished it, but I just assumed maybe it got damaged in a storm, but it was a beautiful building. And it was demolished, and then they began to use just the first building. So I think if you go back to, I don't know, I think Will is trying to find it here. I don't know if he can get it on the screen.
What address?
Okay,
I mean,
so
was that Avenue
it's
Avenue
27th and M.
M? I was gonna say L.
Yeah.
I was gonna guess L
So if
from
you
my
look
memory.
so you look above what it's the Rosenberg Library, and you look in the back of the building, you can see
Oh,
part of it. But I don't know why they demolished it. Now, right now, it's a park, a little small park, and we have a Jack Johnson statue in it.
and for those who may not know who Jack Johnson is, he was a famous black boxer.
The first Black heavyweight champion of the world.
There you go. I knew you'd get it more right than me.
Yeah, yeah. Born in Little Galveston, Texas, but I guess you perfected his skills on the wall. He would take change, beating up people. So yeah.
What somebody asked, was the Central High School originally a fee-paid school, not a public school? And how did the community support students who could not pay the fees?
Okay, it was a free school. Our schools, most of the schools back then were run by the city. So the school was the City of Galveston Free Public Schools. So the city funded the schools.
Really?
Yeah. So there was no charge. There wasn't a charge for the Barnes Institute. Everything was free. Many of the churches had little small kindergartens and things like that too.
Well, I encourage everybody to go to Galveston for many reasons. It's one of my favorite places. And I look forward to, I haven't been to I didn't make it to Galveston last year, but I will try to make it this coming soon. And I will be sure to check out your exhibit. And I encourage all of you to get the books, but it's beautiful architecture, rich history. It's a really special place. And because of people like Tommie and the Galveston Historical Foundation. So
Yes,
if nobody has any more questions, please let us know.
well, go
Oh,
on.
there's one. How did the famous 1900 storm impact the African American community?
We just had a presentation at Rosenberg Library about that. It impacted greatly, just as much as the rest of the city. But unfortunately, most of the stories that were written about them looting and things like that. But if it wasn't for the African American citizen, many of the people wouldn't have been buried. They did the labor because we had over 6,000 people who perished during that storm. And if you include the whole area surrounding over 12,000 people, it is still the worst natural disaster in the United States as of today. We've had other places to have storms and lost people, but we lost lives. We lost most lives in it. What we found is that there were those who did survive. Some of them actually gave other people shelter, and they weren't of their color. And the story, we have some photos of people working. Those are the ones who were burying the dead. So they did the hard work. And, if you're talking about 6,000 people, some of them went out to sea, and when they would go out, sometimes when the water would come in, the bodies would float back out. In fact, that's what they tried to do at first. And then they realized they were going to have to bury. So as far as losing homes, they lost homes and lives also, just like the other. But the paper just didn't give them credit for what they did. And I think at our Rosenberg Library, I don't know if they still have the exhibit up, but they came up with various names of families they knew did survive and what they did to survive and who they helped also. Yes.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate your time. We appreciate the Galveston Historical Foundation working with us. It's my old stomping ground for 5 years and is where my career started. And I have very fond memories of my starting my career there. And so I look forward to returning, and I hope, like I said, many of you will take the time to go south and visit
Yes, do.
a really
And
special place.
when you come, bring a friend, and our exhibit is $10 for adults, 18 and 18, well, adults, and then 18 to 6 is $5. Under that age is free. However, if you have a group of 10, it's much cheaper, and a lot of groups are coming in now from churches, and some people are having family reunions, and they're coming to the exhibit. We're normally open Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Friday and Saturday from 8 to 4 because we want to close down at 5. And on Sundays from 12 to 4. So it's open year round. I think one of the problems we had, we opened it on June 19th. And I think people thought it was just for this month, but for the June month. But there are a lot of free things in Galveston too. So you probably rode the ferry. We'll have one of the few free ferries in the United States. And it can be a nice day trip to fly to ferry, watch the pelicans. Sometimes you see dolphins. Sometimes it's just a pleasure to ride on it. So we invite all of you to visit Galveston. You can find information on Galveston Historical Foundation website, galvestonhistory.org, where if we're having any event. Also, you can go to visitgalveston.com, and they have a list of all the things that you can attend. Restaurants from restaurants to play areas. So
There's one last question. How did the enslaved people in Galveston react to the news of their freedom? Were they able to openly celebrate, or was that not really allowed?
well, they did celebrate. You know, some of them did celebrate. Some of them left hoping they could find some of their family. Many of them traveled to Houston. If you know, Houston has Emancipation Park. Many of them went to Houston also. Uh, they did have a celebration. I did mention the fancy ball that they had. I think that most of the celebrations were at homes and at churches. Now, I would say that during the Jim Crow era, they were not as flashy as they'd been before because they were a little nervous about that. But once that got better, then people continue to do so. So Galveston has celebrated, I guess, as a city, entire city since 1980. So there were celebrations, and you know, the famous barbecue, a watermelon cake, pie, anything people could bring. Now, for my family, I don't remember a lot about the celebration because my parents were working almost 24/7. But I do remember my mother would make homemade ice cream with the old crank where you had to turn it. My dad was the last one because he was the one that was strong enough to get it hard. So yes,
Well, actually, I have one more question. So you remember when Galveston was still segregated, the Jim Crow,
yes.
you know, when did you really see Galveston um, really become less segregated?
Well, it's a Galveston was segregated, but it was more of the social type of segregation because when I was growing up, our city is more segregated now than it was then. On our block, I think were two families, black, and I don't know, there were other nationalities on the block. One thing that I know would happen, even though you didn't socialize, if anybody was ill or mother had a newborn, people were going to come there with food and clothing and so on. There was one gentleman who told me that he lived in a neighborhood, I think it was only one black family in that neighborhood, but someone on that street was the first one to have a television. So everybody would go to that house whenever there was something on. So I would say that it's probably more segregated now than it was then.
Wow, that's sort of,
And that's more social than anything. It was not, you still couldn't go in their restaurants, but we were glad that, you know, the other people wanted to come to ours, and when like with our restaurants, that was really the way they made a lot of their money. I mean, they would open the doors to everybody. So they had people of all nationalities buying their food, which helped them a whole lot. So yeah, plus we also, when we finally integrated the schools completely in 1968. Now the signs were gone, but one of the things that they happened, they merged with the Ball High School, which was was the only other high school public school. When they merged, Central High School had a reputation of having strong students, a great athletic program. Academically, they scored high in contests, uh, fairs, and so on. So once they merged, it was not a matter of you had students that were somewhat behind. And I would think that our athletic program probably helped us a lot because I say this, Ball High had one district in probably 15, 20 years when they merged the schools. So they were kind of glad to have us there to boost their sports program.
well, again, thank you so much for sharing your evening with us. And I thank you tremendously. And I hope you have a good evening. And I hope many come to visit your exhibit and hopefully will purchase your books to learn more. And I know
Well,
I need to.
we thank you so much for allowing us to tell our story.
Well, it's
Thanks.
an important story to tell. So thank you.
Okay.
Keep telling it.
Okay, will do. Thanks.
Have a
Bye.
good evening.